Hi everyone, this is Emily. Welcome to my channel. I am here today to do a review and analysis and chat about this amazing book by Naomi Novik called Spinning Silver. This was a choice book that I read for January 2023 because I wanted to delve into some wintry reads, and I had not read any adult fantasy in probably 20 years. It never was my favorite genre, other than children's literature fantasy or young adult. And I have to say, I'm absolutely in love with this book, and I can't wait to talk all about it and give you some tips if you haven't read it, because there are some confusing aspects, a few trigger warnings, and a few things you might need to know when reading. Not a lot in here that's mystery suspense where I have to worry about spoiler alerts. But the first thing I wanted to say is that this is an adult fantasy winter novel, and it has some fairy tale aspects to it, and I think that both women and men would love it. I think this leans more toward a book that women would like, and I'll tell you about it in a minute. But first I had to write this down because there's so many, but this book has won a lot of awards. So it has been a New York Times bestseller, named one of Paste's best fantasy books of the decade, one of the top 10 books of the year, according to the New York Public Library. It's an Amazon editor's pick, and it is also, one of the most 100 notable books of 2018. And I have to say, I agree. I mean, I don't have a ton of other fantasy to compare to, but I particularly love books that are in magical wintry settings, because I'm a real sucker for the holidays and Christmas, and anything wintry makes me think of Christmas. So something that I knew I would love. But let's talk about the book a lot. So the first thing I want to say about this book is that it's a tale about the story of three very young women, women, 18 to 20 range, I guess, I don't know. And how their lives entwine and come together to save their kingdom, and girls that did not previously know each other. And on that note, the first thing I want to say is the one complaint I have about this book is it was not clear that that's what was going on in the first couple chapters. So I did not know that it really isn't clear. So you'll see in the chapters this little fan. I did not know that. I understand that those mean it's like a scene divider, where the scene ends and goes into a new scene, even though it's in the same chapter. This author uses those little fan dividers as change of point of view to a different character. What's very confusing is that when you're first reading this book, it is not clear that you're not talking about the same girl. So, for example, the very first character we meet, her name is Miriam. She is the moneylender's daughter. The moneylender is the man who goes around and collects debt from everybody in this dark, wintry, kind of, I guess, European-ish village where perpetual winter is going on. And he's not doing a very good job. They're starting to lose money. They're not having enough to eat. They used to be fairly well off. The mother comes from a wealthy family. So the daughter steps in and says, I'm going to take over for my dad. He's doing a crummy job. I'm going all in. She starts going around town, bullying people for money, threatening them, collecting all the debt that's owed to her father, the moneylender. And suddenly they start becoming wealthy again. They start getting all their money back. She does a really good job to where she almost like replaces her father. So the first chapter 2, we're learning, and this is a Jewish family, so there's a lot of reference to, Jewish culture and whatnot. And so we're learning about Miriam, and then suddenly maybe we go into the second chapter, something like that. We're talking about her, and suddenly there's that divider with the fan, and suddenly like Miriam's talking about her mother, and then suddenly we go into a divider, and now there's this girl still doing, and there's this narrative still going on with the girl talking about her mother's now sick, and her mother dies, and the father takes her out, buries her kind of coldly, and they've had all these dead babies. And what confused the heck out of me is Miriam had said her father, the moneylender, is wonderful and kind and gentle, kind, wonderful man. And suddenly we're in a change of perspective to a different girl, which it was not clear because the author did not use her name early on. And it just kind of seemed like a continuation of the same girl's narrative. And so suddenly, we're hearing that her father will beat her, whip her with a belt, buried the mother coldly. And I'm thinking, what the heck? Like, just in the last chapter, it said he was the most kind, wonderful man she's ever known. And so I wrote that down in my notes. Like, it didn't become clear to me. And unless that was an intentional story structure, it didn't become clear at all until into this is Wanda, the second girl, and into that chapter, the money lender's daughter, Miriam, comes to their house trying to collect money, but from the father, who's a drunk, that is owed to the money lender. Now so this is a different house. There was no real clear transition to that. So be aware that there are three different girls and their stories are entwining. And once you meet them all, you'll see the cues. You can tell when it's switching, but early on it's very confusing. So Wanda is the girl who is their mother is dead. Their father is an abusive drunk. She has two little brothers. Father beats her regularly. They live in this poor, dumpy little cottage. But anyway, the father didn't have the money to pay the moneylender's daughter back, so he sends Wanda off to kind of be their servant to the moneylender's family, to go there every day and work for them to work off his debt. He's a real winner. So that happens, and so then we have now a lot of scenes from Wanda's perspective, but Wanda doesn't really engage in dialogue. We just see her describing how she did this, she does that, she witnesses this, she witnesses that, but it's such a deeply moving perspective. I really love Wanda's perspective. Her point of view character is more from observation, like she's learned to keep quiet, not to talk, from her father, to be afraid of everything, but she's a hard worker. She kind of comes into herself, gets her self-esteem back, and but she goes back home and she's getting beaten, or she doesn't get there fast enough, she's getting beaten. So trigger warning, there's a really brutal scene where the father's just beating the heck out of her and her brothers violently. So there's some child abuse scenes in there. Doesn't end well for him, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But trigger warning on that. But I really feel for her because she's like the silent character from when we get into her point of view, and she really just loves and appreciates this Jewish family who's so kind to her, and anyway, so that's the second girl. But the fantasy aspect is there's this fairy lord called the Stark, or the Stark King, if I'm pronouncing that right, Stark. Stark. I just call him the Stark King. And there's a road that they can see across the village called the Stark Road, which is a magical snowy road that goes across to the other land, and it only appears when the Stark comes into their human land or when he's going back, but other people can't get on it or go there. And the Stark, they're afraid of them. They believe the Stark has put them in this perpetual winter. He will kill people and freeze them in their tracks. It makes me kind of think of like Jack Frost or something like that. But anyway, he ends up showing up at Miriam's house because the Stark learns there's a reputation that she can turn silver into gold just because she's collecting money. So he brings her a sack of magical Stark silver and says, turn this into gold. I'll be back. If you don't do it, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to turn you into frost and freeze you forever. So he tells her she has to do it 3 times. And so she turns it into gold by exchanging it or getting, I won't tell you how she does that, but and then eventually he gives her more and more, and she's like, I don't know if I can exchange this all for gold. And he says, if you don't, I'm either going to kill you, and if you do turn all of this to gold, I will reward you and make you my Stark bride, my wife. And she's like, well, this is not like it's not like any better than the other solution, because everyone fears the Stark in the Stark land. So he was basically saying, either I'm going to kill you or I'm going to take you over to the Stark world away from your family, and you're going to live there as my prisoner. So so that happens. But then we meet the third girl, who is Princess Irina, and Miriam meets her by going to the royal, I guess, castle to inquire about getting gold, and meets Irina. The two antagonists in this book would be Irina is forced to get married to a czar, like I guess a Russian czar, TSAR, or was it Middle Eastern? Yeah, something like that. I don't remember, but a czar, to czar, and he's possessed by a demon. So when the demon comes out, the demon is the antagonist in the book, that possesses this man she has to marry. And then also the Stark is known to be the other antagonist. But what I did not expect in this book is for there to be an undertrope of romance. I did not expect that, especially in the last 1/3 of the book as we get toward the end. So it's kind of one of those stories that has a little bit of everything. It has fantasy, it has magic, it has mysticism, it has romance, it has, we get some of that Stockholm syndrome stuff going on here, where you end up falling in love with someone you think you hate, kind of a scenario. But I really, what I love about this book so much is the writing of the winter, and this book is winter, page 1 to page 400, whatever. It is winter, winter, winter. Not only in the human land, it just wintry, like mounds everywhere and freezing, and just really shows what their life is like. And then this magical snow road, the Stark road, that goes over to the Stark land, which is kind of like a Tolkien-ish, or like a Narnia snowy land. When Miriam gets taken there, which she does, we get introduced to the fantasy part of the novel, which is the Stark King's kingdom of all these Stark-like creatures. And I think of them like Avatar-ish, these gorgeous blue ice creature, like human-esque, but they're kind of blue, but like a pale translucent blue, like snow and ice, and you can see blood running through their skin that's blue, like waterfalls, and water running through their veins, and flowing white hair, and in this land it's just like beautiful and glittering and sparkling and magical, and waterfalls coming from nowhere, and just ice and snow in a more of a fantasy, like almost like you'd see on a cover of a book, is what the whole land looked like, and ice castles and ice furniture, and it's just so beautiful. Like, and the writing style really brings you into the book. You do not even have to try. Not only the story that starts with the three girls sucks you in, when you get to this fantasy realm, wow, it's just like, I kind of want to go there, but I do want to say that the writing is very lyrical, and I'm a sucker for beautiful descriptive writing. And I'm actually going to read a little bit of this beautiful Stark land. When Miriam first goes there, gets taken there. The Stark sleigh took us flying fast over the silver road. It ran between two ranks of tall white trees, their ash-gray bark fading to lighter branches covered with leaves the color of milk with translucent veins. Small six-pointed flowers like enormous snowflakes drifted down upon our shoulders and into our laps as the hooves of the deer went drumming onward. The road's surface smooth as a frozen pond. I could see nothing but winter all around. I tried to break the silence a few times to ask where we were going or how long the journey would be, but the Stark didn't even look at me. Finally, a mountain began to rise up at the end, lost in mist and hard to see at first because of the distance, I thought, but it didn't get any easier to make it out. Even as it came nearer and grew great, light passed through the mountain, and glinted on the edges, but only for a moment, and then it found a new place, or a new part of the mountain to make bright, as if the whole of it was made of cut glass instead of stone and earth, and the road climbed up a ramp to its side to a tall silver gate. The hooves flashed as quickly, and the trees glided as steadily past, but the mountain came no nearer the more we went on. We didn't seem to draw any closer. And then we emerged from the forest into the canopy of white trees where it ended. The Stark road fell in with a river running in the opposite direction. coming from the mountain and covered in a thin, creaking layer of ice. Large flows outlined in dark water, gradually sliding away downstream. As we came closer, I saw that a narrow waterfall from the mountain fed the river, a long, thin veil falling down the side of the glass mountain that ended in a pool of blurring mist before the river ran away. I didn't understand where the waterfall came from. There was no snow resting on those strange crystalline slopes to melt and feed it, no earth that it might have drained from, but we passed close enough for me to feel a fine spray on my cheek before the road climbed up and the silver gates swung open, and we went in. The sleigh plunged inside the mountain without slowing, moving like a blink from one light into another, a strange glimmering that seemed caught in the walls, with twisting lines of silver veined through them, and here and there a flash of brilliant crystal in vivid colors. Darker mouths of branching tunnels split away around us, but our road kept climbing upwards and curving, gathering light until at last it emerged into a vast, frost-white meadow. I thought at first we'd gone through the entire mountain and came back out the other side, but we hadn't. We were inside the great mountain. The pale, endless gray of the sky in here, too, was broken up into a jeweled brilliance. Thin, dazzling rainbow lines sketched across it, and in the center of the meadow beneath that diamond roof, a grove of white trees. Is that just not the most beautiful introduction to a snowy, white, crystal, magical fantasy land? I don't know what is if it's not that, but the whole time she's in that land, it's like that. The description of like their icy, castle, and even the foods they eat and where they get the foods, and the creatures or the people, Starks, whatever they are, non-human, human-like creatures that are made of kind of snowy, cold ice. So it's just beautiful. And we have some really pretty writing as well when we talk about Irina, the princess who gets married to the Tsar. When he's being possessed by a demon, the hot, fiery flame creature that kind of comes out and what that does to people. That's really brilliant writing as well. And Irina, being a very humdrum, homely princess, she actually gets some magical powers because she ends up being gifted a crown made with magical silver. And once she puts on the crown, she can look into glass and transport through the glass into that Stark world, where she goes to hide from her demon husband, so to speak. I'm going to read a beautiful passage from that as well. It gives another perspective from a different character of this wintry wonderland. But when I went to the tall mirror that hung up on the wall and looked at myself there, standing in the whirling snow of the dark forest, I stepped up to the glass, a bitter cold radiating against my face. I shut my eyes and took a step, terrified of every outcome. To meet only hard glass against the end of my nose, no escape. Maybe another night. No glass to my face, but when I opened my eyes again, there I was, alone in a forest of dark pine trees covered with snow, surrounding me endlessly in every direction. The sky was a dark gray overhead, only evening twilight without any gleam of stars, and it was so bitterly cold I had to hold my mouth against my lips to keep my breath from freezing my face. Thin flakes of snow drifted around me, pricking my skin like tiny needles. It wasn't merely a cold winter night or even a blizzard. It was a gnawing, unnatural cold that tried to creep directly to my heart and lungs and then asked what it's doing there. So, love it. Love this book so much. It is so beautiful. One thing I don't like, I have to be honest with my reviews, I think the author here made two mistakes that would finish off this book as absolutely brilliant. Two mistakes. One is, I believe you need to rein in how many points of view you have in a novel with fiction characters. I think the novel should be entirely from the three perspectives of the different girls, which we have, but for some odd reason, the author tries to put in very occasional POVs, point of views, or perspectives from very unimportant characters, such as we have like two scenes or maybe chapters where Irina, the princess's nanny or maid, has a scene from her perspective, just witnessing what's going on. Then we have Wanda, her little brother's, one that's really little. We have several whole chapters from his perspective, just a little boy that's like 6 or 7 watching what's going on, which is kind of odd. I think we have one chapter from the older brother, then we perspective, then we have a few scenes, maybe even a chapter or sections from Irina's czar husband, who's possessed by the demon, but just like one. So it's too many point of views. It's not consistent in that way, and I don't feel that switching to the points of views from those secondary characters for those brief bouts did any purpose at all, and there's too much scene shifting. So that is something you see more in newer writers. So I really would recommend that author rein that in a little. And it does get confusing to follow along, and it didn't seem like it had a purpose. I think there was even one chapter from Panova Melstom's perspective, which is Miriam's mother, her mother who's Jewish. So that was, I just don't think that added anything. It was just too many POVs. And my other, I'm not going to tell you what happens at the ending or anything like that, but I can say, as in most fantasy novels, there's somewhat of a happy ending, sort of. But since this whole story is about 3 different girls and how they intertwine and their stories, what I noticed is that 2 of the 3 girls had a happy ending, a kind of fairy tale-esque happy ending. One of them did not. And it's not to say her ending was bad or she had resolution, but she was vastly and grotesquely overlooked at the ending. So the 2 girls had, their spins on whatever, their good fortune or happy ending, fairy tale, whatever. This other girl did not. She wasn't paired with a love match or happy ending. She ended up being, nothing spectacular happened. This was from the character of Wanda, who was made to be the servant girl. It's almost like she became more free, but it was she wasn't really even mentioned at the ending to go in and give her happy ending. That it didn't feel at all equal to the happy ending the other 2 girls had. And I don't know if that was intentional, because that girl was disadvantaged, and generally that many great happy things don't happen. Like, maybe that was a tactic to keep her at the same level she was. I mean, she ended up with a more secure place to live or something. Okay, fine. But it felt like she was vastly overlooked at the end, like forgotten about almost. And I did not like that. So I do have to say, the very last line of the book gave me a chuckle. Kudos to the author on that. Left it a little bit of a funny, quirky mystery and a direct line right to the reader, which you do not see in the whole rest of the book. So that made me laugh a little bit. So other than that, if you do not generally like adult fantasy, or if you are, I don't know. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I love wintery books. I love fairy tale type spin-offs. I love the suspense of it. I loved the trope of the nemesis and the girl and the damsel in distress, and that gets taken or captive, but then the captor is kind to her, and positive things happen. I love the magical lands and worlds. I love anything that makes me think of winter, or just that. Everything about it just reigns just like a place you want to go to, and really wanting to know how it's going to turn out, and the compassion and kindness in the characters, the sort of overcoming adversity, becoming free from entrapment, and all 3 of these girls are entrapped. The girl who's a servant is entrapped not only with her father, but then entrapped as having to pay off her father's debt. Irina is entrapped. To be forced to marry a man she doesn't want to marry because her father is making her do it. And Miriam becomes trapped as well into this Stark agreement, the Stark thing that he comes and makes her do things she doesn't want to do, and she gets sucked into that land. So all of these girls are entrapped. They all have to overcome adversity. They all grow, change, have different endings, and they entwined across each other's paths along the way, and I love books like that. But well, poor Wanda was just so overlooked at the end. I just can't go over it. Okay, well anyway, that is my review of Spinning Silver, and just to double check, there's one trigger warning. There's one mention of the word rape in there. They do not show any rape scenes. Several beating scenes. That's really it. Not much other violence, really. And it wasn't too supernatural to not be believable. Almost felt believable. It almost felt like conceivable, this story. Like, that's how well written it was. And let's see, is there any other trigger warnings? Just want to make sure I wrote down. I don't see anything else for trigger warning. Yeah, but there's a little bit of everything. There's some, Jewish lore. There's some religion and culture in there. There's some romance. There's adventure. There's just magical elements, some realism elements. So very well done. Very good book. I can't wait to read Uprooted, her next book, which I purchased. So again, please pick up Spinning Silver. I'll link that below. Cannot recommend it enough. Let me know what you think and what you thought of the ending, but don't spoil it. No, don't spoil it. But am I right that Wanda was overlooked a little bit? All right. Thank you, and I'll see you in another video.